Hello. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. The Practice is an unrehearsed, unedited look into my workflow, mostly in Cinema 4D and other digital art applications. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, designer, and illustrator, currently residing in San Francisco, California. I'm really excited to have everyone back for another episode of The Practice this week. Um, it's been an exciting and beautiful spring for me. There's been a lot of updates, a lot of cool projects coming in. I haven't been quite as active on social media as I typically like to, just because there's a lot of project work coming in, which was great after a little bit of a slow winter. So there are some new updates up on my website, diligencedlgnce.com. So if you want to give that a look, that would be sweet. And there will be more fairly exciting projects launching soon. So I'm really excited to be able to share that stuff with you in the near future. Um, as for today, I've got something a little bit out of the ordinary lined up. Obviously, we'll still be working in Cinema 4D to create an image start to finish. But instead of doing like heavily modeling intensive techniques this week, you'll see that I've got this whole load of images of different lichens pulled up here. I found these in this cool book in an old not a biology, what is it called, a botany library that's near the botanical gardens near where I live. And I was just like blown away by the range of textures and colors and patterns and things that came out in these photos. So I took a whole bunch of photos of those photos, which is why you've got some of these sort of highlights and weirdness in some of these photos. But we can work around that stuff. But I was just super inspired by these, and I'm going to try to use a variety of techniques in Cinema 4D to create geometry and create a scene with these things. In addition to more typical stuff like using them for texturing and for bump maps and stuff like that. So I'm not sure exactly what sort of a scene we're going to be making this week, but I know we're going to be using it primarily. We're going to be making it primarily using these images. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for me because it's not typically the workflow that I use, but there's just some really really cool stuff in here. So I think we can generate some awfully awesome stuff. And with that being said, I think it's almost about time to jump in. As I say every show, love it when people get chatty, say what's up in the chat. I know I've got friends over on Periscope right now who might be watching that. I unfortunately cannot read your comments, so if you do want to drop a line as we're working on this stuff, check out the YouTube or the Twitch streams. And other than that, it's time to jump in. Say hi, and if if you're working on anything cool, if you're at a good stopping point, you want some feedback, you just want to get more eyes on the piece you're working on, drop a link in one of these chat windows, and I'll pull it up at some point on the stream, and we'll take a peek. So, welcome. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a couple of planes and get sort of a floor going. I want to make sure with this technique that we have plenty of like subdivisions or geometry in the pieces we'll be working with. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to load an image into this displacement channel. Actually, let's see. No, I'll just load them directly. Let's see. Here we go. Oops. You can see all of a sudden, immediately, just by using this displacement, we're getting some pretty cool results. All right. And ticking on the subpolygon displacement is huge, because what that's going to do is create an additional level of subdivisions for us to work with. Now, what I'm not sure of is if there's a way to preview the displacement that you're getting in the viewfinder. In which case, what I might need to do, one way around this actually, so I'm going to turn off Enhanced OpenGL. I'm going to keep things fairly simple. And then what I think I can do is turn on the, enhanced, the interactive render region. Because what I want to do is use these displacements to get us some geometry for a landscape. I want to see if I can't create an entire landscape image using only, well, not only, but primarily image-based geometry. What's cool about the interactive render region is it will update things like live for you. I'm going to add a little bit of color in there, but not so much. Let's see if we can get this a little bit higher. See, that's too high. There we go. Now turning that blur up is going to soften some of the edges, which is definitely what I wanted. See, now already that's starting to look a bit like an alien landscape. Hey Sam Finn, it has been a while. Thanks for coming back. Hey Candy. Candy's been a pretty awesome repeat guest the last few weeks. Appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for stopping by again. How you guys doing today? I'm going to make another copy of this guy. Swap out image. Go something a little simpler. I think that might work better as a foreground image. What I really want to do is this kind of thing where we're starting to like mix these different pieces of geometry and these different textures. I think that's going to give us a pretty sweet look. What I will do, I think, once I establish a bit of a composition, is probably come through and add in some primitive shapes and control things a little bit tighter, because there's going to be a lot of back and forth in trying to sort of control these and make them look right. Hey, sources back. So Sam went freelance. That's cool. You quit your day job and went out on your own, huh? Tell us a little bit more about that. That is really exciting stuff. Congratulations. So let's see here. Why don't we physical sky? See, that's going to change the look drastically. Except who wants to see that stupid HUD thing? That shit off. So even that is starting to look like mountains already, isn't it? I know this is an awfully low res preview. It's starting to look like mountains already, which is great. This is the type of thing we want to do. And I think what I'll also do is start, as we get a little further in, start mixturing in some of these images just as textures as well, which will give us a cool result. Maybe I'll do a proper rendering at this point. Now, all this stuff that's being generated is all dependent on the image, obviously, but you can see how just with relatively little geometric input, you can use these images to generate really, really cool stuff. I think some nice effects in there. And actually, what's happening, since I photographed these from a book, you're getting a little bit of that dot pattern in there. So let's see how that works out. I might need to go in and do a little bit of photoshopping of these textures to sort of blur them or soften some of that grain. But, as of this point, I'm undetermined as to how to handle that. I think um, we might actually get some sort of cool results. That is way too purple for me. Cool. Hey, source. Yeah, I did see Beeple's 10-year mark. That's really really impressive. Beeple, I think, is an inspiration to us all, a pioneer in the cinema 4D world and definitely in the everyday world. You can see there's like thousands of Beeple clones on Instagram just following his really rather amazing footsteps. But for me, personally, everydays are a bit much. I did an everyday project back in 2005 or six, probably. Actually, if you, it's a little bit embarrassing, but if you Google Project 100 Animals, you see I was doing every day for a while there. I was doing a drawing of an animal every day, and it was it was a great practice. It was a good way to learn a lot, especially about a certain digital painting technique that I was doing back then. But it just wound up becoming a bit too much for me. And I think every day was a little bit, just a bit too much. I need days off, and I need time to work on client work and stuff like that. And sometimes if I've got deadlines and there's just too much going on, doing it every day just eats a little bit too much of my schedule. But that being said, I mean, for some people it works really, really well, and it's an excellent way to push and challenge yourself, which I think is obviously a good thing. But just personally speaking, for me, doing something weekly like this is more manageable for my schedule, and has been working out a little bit better thus far. But nonetheless, people's a legend and a killer. So very cool to see. So Sam, tell us a little bit more about your transition of freelance. Did you have some client work lined up that you're able to take on when you left? Are you sort of roughing it and going alone? Tell us about the transition. It's exciting stuff. I'm always interested to see how others do it. That's really great, Sam. Congratulations. I hear you, Sam. I'm in sweatpants right now. That's cool. Congrats, dude. Congrats. Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, Sam. It's really cool, and it seems like London would be an excellent market for designers and animators and things like that. It's a huge advertising agency, market, and a lot of cool design stuff happening in London. Um, for a while there, London was like the center worldwide for cool adverts, as you guys would call them. Still a lot of really great stuff coming out of there. Agreed on the animation front. Um, I am not trained as an animator, but having taught myself some animation has brought me a good deal of work, to be honest. So for those just tuning into the stream now, what we're doing today is using a series of images of lichens actually, which have this amazing textural and color range. Ooh, I should use this guy next. Um, to create, and we're using those to generate geometry and create sort of an otherworldly kind of landscape, which has been pretty fun, but a little bit time consuming. And actually, this is slightly render intensive, this technique. So, taking a bit of time to get these preview images going. I've got this interactive render preview open, and I've got it set way low just so I can work with it. It's taking a little bit of time. Yeah, the style thing or like the voice. A lot of artists call it like their voice, their artistic voice. It took me forever to figure mine out, and I was always I was always drawn to artists who had a really cool voice, who had a really unique style, and did sort of interesting things with their work. Um, the drawing techniques or the rendering techniques, the technical stuff is a lot easier to learn. You can have someone literally tell you like, just press this button and that's how it'll work, or use these types of pencils in this in such and such a way, and you'll get a certain effect. That is not necessarily the case with a style. Certainly, you can look at others to emulate the types of things that they're doing, but ultimately, it's something you're going to have to sort of figure out on your own, which is exciting, but also can be a little bit nerve wracking, a little bit difficult to develop, which which is okay. I feel like maybe in the last few years, I'm just starting to figure out what my voice is. And gosh, guys, I mean, I've been a professional graphic designer for over 10 years, and I've been drawing since I could pick up a crayon. So if you're in your 20s or even your 30s and you're still figuring out what that voice is going to be, what that style is going to be, do not sweat it. That is perfectly natural. Yeah, you're right. You're right, source. A lot of people will just copy and hide their sources and hope that no one notices, which happens a lot. And look, the other thing, a lot of professional artists get really upset when people are, quote unquote, stealing their work or stealing their style. And I understand that. I get frustrated when I see it sometimes too. But the fact is that that's what young artists do. I did that as a young artist. I would straight up like copy pieces. I would when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, I would literally recreate images that I saw that were really really good. I would never try to sell those or pass them off directly as my work necessarily, but the influence was there for sure, and it's something that happens, and it's okay to copy. I'll say the word copy and use air quotes around it. I wouldn't copy work and pass it off as on your own, but study the masters, study people you are influenced by. You'll get better. You'll learn a lot from them. I'm going to turn this around 180 degrees. I didn't like there's a little bit of a highlight sort of going on in the middle. See if I can sort of bury that further back, which is working better for me. Cool. Okay. And there's just like so many cool images here. I'm not sure if I'm going to get an opportunity to use them all. Yeah, thanks, Source. I'm just trying to get like a really crazy, highly textured landscape kind of thing going on. All right, let's see if we can pull up this example here. Oh, no work, no worky. Ah, yeah, pulling inspiration from something like that is totally fine, and you've redone it enough, whereas it doesn't feel like a direct ripoff, which is a good thing. Oh, you guys follow each other. How amazing. Hmm. I'm going to turn this off and do a proper rendering at this point so we can see what we're really dealing with. ambient occlusion back on. Dexter's back. What's up, dude? Hmm. Now, these renderings are taking a really long time, especially as I'm streaming. That's a little bit of an issue, potentially. Well, that's rocking. Another thing I'm going to try is for this foreground for now is to use a bump map, which is going to give us just a little bit more texture, a little bit more grain. And that won't. The cool thing about a bump map is it'll affect the way light hits an object without affecting the geometry itself. So you'll notice if you put a bump map on a sphere, you'll get nice bumpy effects in the reflections and in the specular, but you won't get actual little edges around the sphere. The sphere will stay perfectly round, which may or may not be what you're after. But if you're not looking for a perfectly round image, it's useful sometimes to use the displacer, which is going to give you the full bumpy outline. This is a rather strange looking landscape in a lot of ways, as you can tell. I think what I might want to do, I want to add a bit of fog. I'm going to adjust this time and location so it's not just high noon. Give us some more interesting shadows, I think, and probably a little bit more of an interesting color. So yeah, the shadows look much more interesting already. You can tell just in this little portion of the image. Well, that's a weird polygon right there. Huh. See what a big difference just changing the direction of the lighting has on an image. You really don't see much of that fog. And looking at it, it felt like I needed a little bit of something to interrupt the very organic and sort of rough and loose composition. I think we need a little something more geometric and simplified to start breaking this stuff up. I'm really liking some of these effects here. It looks like rocky, planty kind of stuff happening. Might add a bit more of these swaths. Probably want to probably here. Oh, okay, interesting. The color is all the way up. So now we're sort of creating a sense of scale, adding a bit more interest in. Let's see if that fog shows up. In fact, I can see over here in the bottom, in the top right, that fog showing up. It just means maybe my parameters are too low. What is the location of this? It's not very high. That's super strange. So, details, fog. Oops. I think we're starting to get a little fog there now. But I think it's a bit too high. Yeah, you can see a bit of haziness coming in, but I want that to lay a little closer to the ground. You got it, Sam. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the dog walk. Cool, let's check it out. Oops. Hello. This is cool. Use World Machine for this stuff. Cool, man. I wish it was just a little bit brighter. I know probably dark is the aesthetic you're going for. If it was just a little bit more contrast, I think might be easier to read some of this stuff. But looks really good. Congrats. It's funny, it's not entirely dissimilar from what we're working on today. Although I've never used World Machine. We are generating some crazy landscapes. Looks like that fog is starting to finally get the settings right, starting to behave the way we want it to. So it was a bit too much here. I didn't really want to see much of it over that horizon line. Now we're seeing just a bit of it, which is fine. And but what it's doing is I like that it makes it really helps what's called atmospheric perspective. It makes it so you compare these images, the mountains feel a lot further away in the second image because that fog is starting to interfere with like the light and how far it travels back in the distance. So it's probably a poor explanation of exactly what's happening, but you guys get the idea. That's what it is. I'm not getting the displacement I want from these spheres, and I'm assuming that that might be because they are not expanded or made editable. So I think they might behave a little better once I expand them. I don't know that for a fact, but we're making it up as we go. I'm rotating these guys so we get a different perspective, a different portion of the mapped image revealed in each of them, which I think will be a little bit more interesting. Provide some variation. Of all these, I'm really liking the way these textures are reading, which is why actually in the last round I made this section a little bit bigger because I think it's quite good. Even take this one, copy it over. See what that gets us. Yes, in fact, making those spheres editable changed dramatically the way those are shaped. Look at that. They go from pretty much basic standard sphere to these crazy spiky things. Which also means that I can just make sure I'm grabbing the right texture. I should really be probably naming all these textures, which I'm in a terrible habit of never doing. So let's turn that down a bit, make it a little rounder by blurring this. Let's even just do a quick preview. What does that look like? That's looking better. This is starting to feel pretty good, actually. I'm digging it. I wonder if we need to include just one more sort of little architectural element, or maybe a few smaller architectural elements, because I like what these pyramids are doing for the composition. Maybe it makes sense to add a couple other little elements. I'll make sort of a bridge between these. Before I do that, let's tidy this up a little bit. Cool. Oops. Oops. Come on, buddy. I'm not getting a lot of bump effect. So what I'm doing is I'm going in here and clicking, go into your bump, you click on the image and you can adjust the exposure. Because technically what you really should do is just use a grayscale image to generate bump and displacement maps so you get a truer black to white range, because that's what it uses basically the range of darks to lights in the image to establish which parts should be pushed high and which should be pushed low. And sometimes that's not ideal if you're using a color image, because that value range can get a little bit sort of muddy or less clear, right? So since I don't feel like going in and making these all grayscale, what I did for the bump in this one channel is clicked on this image here and I raised the exposure and the black point so that we have a more high contrast image, which I think will ultimately work for us and get us a little bit more bump. I also increased some of the parameters in that bump channel as well. Add a little bump to these mountains as well. Let's try this. The one thing about that bridge that I'm not sure about is right here, there's this great rock which is casting a little shadow, and I'm digging that. I want to interrupt the rock. See there you can see the impact of that bump map. It's looking kind of grainy, and it's starting to show off the mesh beneath. I wonder how the mountain's behaving as well. Just trying some things out. That's the beauty of digital art, is you can always go back. You can always try it again. Always alter what you've made. I'm not liking the impact of that bump map in the floor. I like the little bit of extra texture, but I don't like how blocky it's becoming. And I don't like what this sort of bridge structure between the two pyramids has done for the landscape here. So I'm going to change that back. Or that's why I changed that. You can see. Let's turn that bump off. What about the mountains? Do we like the bump on the mountains? I'm not noticing a big difference. Maybe because it's so far away. Also could be because, it's a different image, so it'll just have a different impact automatically. Now, the one thing about this technique is it does necessitate a bit of back and forth between the rendering and the viewport. So you can inject a lot of detail into a scene very quickly using this technique, but then to really finesse things and get them fine-tuned exactly the way you want them, then it may take a bit of time. You're sort of going back and forth a little bit, but it's very cool. Hi, Talos. Thanks for swinging by. I'm gonna bump up the intensity on the sky a little bit. Same with the sun. I think we could do with a bit of stronger lighting, and I might try some different rendering settings actually for how to look. Oh, we don't even have ambient occlusion turned on, so I'm going to throw on AO. Also going to throw on global illumination. This might absolutely crush us here, especially since I'm streaming. My poor computer might get sad. But let's see what we get. The fog is probably going to look a little bit better with global illumination turned on. I forgot we had turned ambient occlusion off, so our shadows are going to probably look a lot nicer. Some of our shadowy areas are hair too dark anyways, and GI is going to help us there a lot. Hey, Chris. Yes, the botanical garden, which I actually live very close to, believe it or not. Um, In fact, if you could see out the window behind me, you'd get a little glimpse of the botanical gardens. And thank you. I take that as a high compliment because it is a very beautiful place. So you can see already that some of these details are popping out a little bit harder. Everything looks a little bit brighter, a little more saturated, which is good. Glad I got rid of that bump map on that ground plane right there. And in general, I'm really pleased with how these rocky, planty areas are coming out. So I added a couple of them. Pretty darn cool. And it does look fairly alien, just in the range of textures and colors that we're getting. Now this is a feature I haven't seen before over here in the basic. The basic tab once you click on the image. But what I'm trying is just turning all of the blur offsets down, which might get us a little bit more of a sharp color in the rendered image. You can see in some areas it does get awfully blurry, like especially in this ground, you hardly see any of the detail that's supposed to be there. And this is really taking a while, obviously. But the lighting looks much better, so that's okay. While that's going, I'm going to add just a little bit more detail by way of some totems. This I think is going to help us get a little bit more of some architectural detail in there. Make it feel like a little bit more of a ancient, distant civilization, if you will. I think is cool, and it'll continue to have some geometric elements contrasting against what's mostly organic, soft, rounded kind of forms, which could work hopefully. Now again, I keep adding additional detail and geometry to the scene, which is going to have an impact on render times, of course. That's okay. That might be too close in the foreground. Let's push that back further. And we're still rendering. We've got a lot of things working against us here in terms of render times. You know, all the blur we added to the displacement channels is very computationally intensive. I think these displacement maps in and of themselves are fairly computationally intensive, especially when you click on subpolygon displacement. So it's like adding sort of geometry to the scene in a way to get nice forms out of the displacement from the images. So yeah, this is a fairly long render time for me. I typically like to keep things fairly simple, especially on the stream because I'm doing two sort of computationally intensive things at once. That's okay. I think we're really quite close to where we want to ultimately be this rendering, and then I'm gonna do one more test with these totems in place. In fact, why don't I do that now? What I'm gonna do actually, so it doesn't take all day. So I'm going to turn GI and AO off, get a much quicker rendering for placement of these totems. Wow, and you can see that altering the blur on those images added a ton of detail, more than I was anticipating. In fact, perhaps even more than I need. I'll be curious to see how all this comes out. I may wind up turning that down a little bit. I do like some of these ridges that we're getting here. That makes it look even more alien. Now we're just chock full of detail in this foreground, which is really nice. Wow. I think I need to do that. Let's go back into basic. Turn that up 1. Wow, same thing on this orange. That's looking really cool now. Wow. Yeah, I think pulling out, and that's something we just discovered together here on the fly, live on the practice. And that's really helpful in getting that alien look too. These sort of giant lichens in the foreground. I went back in and added just a hair of blur, just a 1%, just to soften this a little bit. See what that gets. But yeah, overall, this is looking so much better. I'm going to finesse using this somewhat cheaper rendering with the GI turned off. I'm going to mess with the placement of some of these totems because I don't think they're perfect. It's tough to tell in the viewport where they're going to land because the displacement isn't all there. That one's not right. This one seems to be floating. This one I'm not even sure we need. Just because with all that additional detail that popped back in, I'm not sure if these totems are even necessary, right? They kind of get lost. That one looks pretty cool with the orange, actually. Yeah. That additional detail and sharpness really added a ton. I think that 1% of blur may have even been too much. So I wonder even, can I do 0.5? Do 0.35. Awesome. Yeah, so this is looking really, really cool. It's kind of reminding me of video game art to a certain extent. Just want to make sure that this section kind of looks right. So that level, which level of blur is going to be appropriate for this? Even slightly less. That's not it. No. I'm just going to say 0.2. What's cool about using image-based displacements is that your texture map is automatically going to line up with the images, right? You can see in here that it's got sort of a realistic look because the light points in the rocks are all the high points here. So once you add a little bit of lighting to that, the texture and the fall off of the shapes work nicely together. Cool. What I'm going to do is I want just a hair of orange in the foreground too. So I'm going to grab one of these pieces. Let's move that right into the foreground. See what that does. See how much that gets us. I just want to do a quick test. Maybe a little too much. Yes, I think I will take it into After Effects or Photoshop actually to do a little bit of post, some color correction. And since it's only been about an hour and a half into the stream, what I think I'm going to do is take you guys with me there. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for the thing to render out, but that's okay. I think there's just a hair too much of this. Let's see what that gets us. I'm going to zoom out a hair. Still too much. There we go. I think that's about right. Cool. I'm going to throw these two back on. It's a little larger. Isn't the best. Let's see. We don't need quite that much. Let's just do 1800. I don't want to kill you guys. Bam. All right. Yeah, that looks really cool, doesn't it? I'm pleased with how this came together. I'm glad I stood there like a weirdo in that library taking photos of these lichen pictures for a few minutes. Totally worth it. All right, so I'm going to give you a nice close-up of that. And I hate to do it, but while this is rendering, all this coffee is running through me. So I have to use a quick restroom break. I'll be right back. It was worth it, wasn't it? Be right back, you guys. Yeah, post it up. Let's see that shit. That sounds like a fun work in progress, Chris. 900 gigs of stuff. That's funny. I recently just got on the ball and got a cloud backup service for myself. Just the type of thing I need to do as a small business owner now. And I had about 400 gigs worth of stuff from the last 6 or 7 years that I needed to back up. And it took forever. It took days and days of this thing just uploading in the background. Kind of a pain in the butt, but glad it's all up there now. I had some external hard drives, so, if I spilt a cup of coffee on my laptop, it wasn't the end of the world. I would have had backup there. But the thing is, if I get robbed and someone takes my drives, or if my apartment catches on fire, something like that, then I would have been out of luck because all the hard drives are right here with my computer and all the backups. So thanks, Chris. Yeah, this is coming along. These textures are really working, and usually I keep things fairly simple in terms of texturing. I like a lot of just bold stripes and flat colors, maybe just a little bit of noise. But this has been a really fun exercise. It's taken a minute to render, I know. So thanks for bearing with me, you guys. We're maybe halfway done at this point. Then we're going to retouch in Photoshop and add a bit of color and maybe bump the lighting up a hair. It's going to look dope. Oh, you were saying love the satellite texture. I was wondering what that sat meant. You guys are talking to each other, and that is cool. I'm going to check on the Periscope stream real quick. See what's happening over there. Live. No live viewers. Anyone on YouTube use Periscope? You guys use Periscope at all? I figured since this is a live show and Periscope is all about live streaming, I figured it's a pretty obvious place for me to stream to as well. And it's kind of cool that I can do just from one source. I can stream to a lot of different platforms. All about sharing. It's all about getting in front of more eyeballs. You know what I mean? How much blur? The foreground I wound up using, I think, 0.2. Yeah, just 0.2%. Just hardly any. Just feeling a little bit too like sort of crispy without any, right? A little bit too kind of pixelated and crispy. Then adding just a little bit of that blur helps out a lot. Well, bear in mind we're zoomed way too far in. So there we are. Now we got a bit of grain on this orange, but it's kind of cool. And for a 2-hour experiment, that's okay. This isn't meant to be a finished piece to sell to somebody. This is a sketch in a sense. This is a exploration. It's practice. Yep, it just takes the edge off. All right, now we're cracking into the sky, so hopefully this rendering starts going a little quicker. This will be one of the longer renderings we've done on the practice. I'm sure viewership is plummeting now. But hey, who cares? All right, I'm going to get more coffee. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I agree. The fog adds a lot of atmospheric perspective. It really pushes those clouds back into the distance. That's what we started with. It was fun to go back and look through the renderings. See how much that added when we altered the position of the lighting. We added that fog. You can see that really starts giving you a little bit more perspective, pushes those the mountains really back into the distance. Building up details. Boom, into the final rendering. It's pretty wild, doesn't it? I'm pleased with how this is coming together. We'll be done rendering soon. We'll be retouching and making this bad boy look awesome. Cool, Source. Yeah, no worries, man. Do your thing. As always, appreciate you hanging out while we create, and hopefully see you next week. Enjoy the footy. All right. Almost 12 minutes. That's a bit long to be doing on the stream, so apologies for that, you guys. See you next week. I know, I think with this, I only wound up using 5 photos from this collection. So maybe we'll come back and do another set someday. I really like this shot. This stuff's really cool. This stuff's really cool. You can imagine this being like a lake bed or something like that. This one's really great. This one's really great. Maybe we'll wind up doing another one of these sometime. This one would have been great to use. Here's our floor texture, ground texture rather. These are some of our little plants that we used. Here is the mountain texture. I believe this is the one we used for the mountains. And here is our cool orange stuff. This is a great one too, this green. Gosh, there's just so much cool stuff you can do. We used these. Did we use this one? I don't think we did. So those are all the source images. Got turned into this. It's pretty darn cool. Man, 18 minutes. Getting there. Cool. Try and pull that link up, see if it works. While we're waiting on this rendering. Oops. Yeah, didn't work. Chris, see if you can share another link. This is a funny 404 page. I've never noticed this before. Little eyes follow the cursor. Quick, rescue us from the bottom. There we go. Cool. Little parallaxy GIF going on. Little TIE fighter action. It's good, man. Did you use lighting to get these red reflections on these foreground shapes here? Looks like it because you got some red over here and some blue on the side. What sort of lighting setup did you use? Looks cool. Man, so this has never happened on the practice before, but we may go over time just in waiting for this rendering. I didn't think it would take that long. But you know what? We're going to go long today. Who cares? We've sat here for this long. I'm not going to leave here without retouching this image and having it be final for y'all. So let's do it. And if you're watching a recap, if you're not watching live, you're just catching this later on YouTube or something like that. I'm assuming and hoping that you'll just sort of skip through this part. That's the beauty of being able to fast forward once you're watching a recap of a live stream. So probably not even hearing me right now at this point, which is possibly a good thing. Yeah. I think I may borrow a little bit from the retouching we did last week where we used a gradient map to alter the color here. I think since these colors are so varied, it may help to have just a really light gradient map across all of it to help maybe unify some of the colors. take a look at doing some of that. Definitely bump the contrast a little bit. Yeah, just really beef it up a little bit, do a quick pass, and add saturation and cool stuff like that. So that's the plan. Ah, the glow. That makes sense. That makes sense, Chris. That really like takes those highlights and adds a bunch of glow and makes them look really cool. Cool. Might render this out later. I'm kind of curious how all this would look from a lower, more ground level point of view. This I'm not going to render for today. Might try after the stream. Just see what it looks like. And I'm going to save this V2. Yeah. Have we already looked at this one? Have I looked at this one yet? I don't know. Let's find out. Oh, no, we hadn't. The last of it. Nice. I like the lighting on this. Always like a cool skateboard. Sweet. Football looks a little bit like hairy, kind of. But yeah, it looks good. The lighting, I think, is the strong part of this for sure. Nice work. Yeah, very 80s. Does have that 80s like horror movie cover kind of vibe. It also reminds me a little bit of like Stranger Things. Had that similar like 80s horror movie kind of aesthetic. It's funny, all that geometry generated really just from a handful of planes. See how many planes we have. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 planes. 12 planes, 5 images, and we've got all of this crazy texture, huh? Kind of wild. This truly does look like an alien world of some sort. This is a technique I'll probably be exploring more in the future. Might bring back to another episode of the practice at some point. Yeah, good call backing off some of that texture on the football. So close to being done. Maybe I can do while we're waiting here is I'll share a little bit of some new stuff that I did from the portfolio. I think many of you, hopefully all of you, have seen this piece, Look to the Sea. It's a short film I completed a couple months ago. When did I launch it? I guess mid-April, so about a month ago. Had some help from a close high school friend who's a great musician and an engineer and recording, like an expert at recording audio. He helped me put a soundtrack together. Also had a guy offer to help named Jacob Appleby who helped do some of the water animations. Here's some stills from that. It's on my YouTube channel as well if you want to check out the movie. What was fun about this, what I did is I did a lot of textural drawings with markers. I photographed and scanned those in and combined those with procedural textures and modeling inside Cinema 4D. And then what I did is I rendered those frames out and then did some hand drawing on top of them, which is how you can see some of these sort of painterly effects. So each frame in this piece was hand painted on one at a time, which was kind of freaking nuts. Another piece I did recently was for this cool startup in San Francisco called Vicarious VR. They just launched, in fact, if you're a Daydream user, if you have an Android phone that's VR capable, check out Vicarious VR in the Google Play Store. It is a really cool and fun way to share content that you make, but 360 videos, flat videos, and images. You can create these stories inside of Vicarious and share them. And I had the yeah, that's right, Chris. Yeah, I'm actually rehashing some of the recent projects that I was working on. This Vicarious thing just went live, and I saw some of your work on there. Thanks for taking part. Actually, the my man Chris here, a routine viewer, was kind enough to get into the beta and help do some testing and stuff like that. And so, what my role in this project was creating some environments. The main one being this home environment, which you can interact with, and there's this sort of 3D UI, which you can see a GIF of here. And then we created a few characters, and we also created this whole big set of stickers and emoji for those guys, which was just a gang of fun. So check out Vicarious VR. Hope to see big things from these guys soon. Hopefully get to work with them again in the future, maybe the next couple months, as they continue to grow the set of stickers and environments and stuff that they're offering. So very cool projects. Here's another one that was completed actually late last year, but I've only recently gotten the chance to post it because it was all that good NDA stuff. But this for Chevy Bolt, this electric car that Chevrolet is releasing, there was an agency down in LA called Tool of North America who tapped me to create some style frames for the advertising. I did not model this car. That was something they provided, but I updated the texturing and obviously lit it and retouched it. And the main crux of what I was working on with them was establishing some of these background shots, the color palette, and lighting. And you can see here some of the stills from the storyboards and from some style frames. Really pleased with how that came out, and a cool big brand to work with. So those are the updates to the folio as of late. And there's a couple other projects that I'm working on now that I'm still under NDA on, but I'm hoping to release to the public soon. Look at this. We've officially gone over 2 hours, but you know what? Buddha would be. Who cares? Almost done with this rendering. And we'll touch that bad boy up. We'll call it a day. Look at this thing. That's a cool little crater, right? Very alien-like. And even though these little leaves are flat, just part of the image and really don't have much geometry to them other than what's being provided by the displacement, they read pretty well. They feel like some plants in the distance. Especially like right in there. That looks really cool. Over here too. So close. Um, I'm not sure if the app works on cardboard. I think you might be able to view it, but the thing is, Daydream has a controller. Daydream has a controller that allows you to interact with and create content in VR, which you can't do with just cardboard because there's no hand controller. There's only the sort of the one button. Um, so yeah, but the plan is, I think, to release it for iOS and for Samsung Gear VR in the future as well. In addition to some of the high-end tethered headsets, I think, at some point in the future. But I think that the crux of the idea is to keep it mobile so that the you know so that there'll be more users who have the chance to share it. And the other thing is, if it's like a social platform, then it makes sense to have it be mobile so folks can take photos with their cameras and just share instantly. And the other cool thing about the app is that a lot of VR apps work only in virtual reality space, whereas this is a hybrid, mobile app that you can use just with your touch screen in 2 dimensions, as well as in VR and 360 degrees, which is really cool. Hey, Talos. Sometimes you animate the face as if the characters are talking. That's a little bit complex. Facial animations are fairly complex. A lot of the animation that I do, the really easy stuff comes from Mixamo, which helps me with all the rigging. That unfortunately does not have rigging of facial features. So when I animate the face, that's usually by hand. So I'll actually just keyframe and make eyes blink or mouths move. But when I do have mouths move, typically it's sort of an up and down kind of thing. I'm trying to think, I don't believe I've ever animated a face to like an audio track that was speaking. That's a really specific skill set and a little bit tricky. Though I'm sure there are some great tutorials out there that would make that stuff a little easier. I know one tool, I think it's called the Pose Morph tool. I'll type that down so you can Pose Morph, I believe is it. You can create some point-based animations and sort of save the states of the mesh and then create sliders in between them, which allow you to create a whole range of facial expressions. I believe it's called pose morphing. Anyone else got tips on animating facial features? That can be quite tricky, for sure. All right, so 37 minutes later. Gosh, that's way too long. So thanks for bearing with me on that. Let's save this bad boy out. It's a ping, and I'm going to go 16 bits because there's some cool color here. And we'll go to practice. Yeah, save. All right, finally. Awesome. So let's retouch this bad boy a bit. Bump that contrast up a bit, get a little bit more lights into the scene. Like I mentioned, play the gradient map a little bit here. I'm not going to go full gradient map on it, but I think we can a little bit of interest, a little bit of a unifying effect. Some reds. So that in and of itself looks really, really cool, right? That undoes all the cool color we already have. So let's just take that down 15%. See what happens when we multiply it. That's really affecting the color range. It's a little bit too far. That's what overlay does. I'm going to add some fake depth of field, see how that feels. Keep it really, really subtle. Just the hair. So like doing everything on separate layers, you can really control it much better. Filter. Add a bit of noise. I'm also going to do see how this looks. It's not going to be congruent with the lighting. This is an alien world. It's got an alien sun. Yeah, this is giving me a lot of trouble for something so simple. I just do this. Just keep it subtle. If there's an alien world, maybe it's got a second. Nope. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you saying worth the wait. I'm really happy with how this came out. Um, Texturally, really interesting. A lot of cool colors. Of course, we went a little bit long, and the rendering took a while, but that's okay. I think having a different look for this show each week is fun. Um, Not all of them are going to be just like the others. Sometimes we do super snappy, fairly quick rendering. Sometimes they take a while. This was definitely an experimental image, but I'm glad I experimented. It was definitely worth it. Really some cool effects in here, and this is the type of thing that could apply to a lot of different scenes. It's something we may play with more in the future on this show. So that being said, appreciate everyone sticking around. We've gone, 2 hours and 20 minutes on this one, which is a super long episode, but that's cool. It's been fun, and I think, it was worth the effort. We got a great image out of it. So, you know, let's let me awkwardly fumble through this little outro here. But like I always say, appreciate everyone stopping by. Wouldn't be much of a show without people who come and tune in and chat and subscribe. So thank you all for that. We're readily approaching the 700 subscriber mark, so things have really been ramping up. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please hit subscribe. We're going to be, sharing this finished piece out on social media all over the place this afternoon. So if you don't already, check me out on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, all those places at DLGNCE. That's diligence for you guys. And so, this is Stuart saying thanks so much, and we'll see you next week, 9 o'clock Pacific, noon Eastern, and we'll be ready to crank out more delicious eye candy for y'all. Hopefully you found this useful. Share it with a friend if you did, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Stuart saying out. Bye.